Hello and welcome back to Bicyclelegs Talks Music and another episode of Favorite Song from Each Album. And can you please welcome back to the channel friend of the show and regular guest, Mr. Todd Evans. Todd, always love having you on the channel.
Hello, I always love being here. I always like to talk about this band too.
Yeah. So today we're going to be picking our favorite song from each XTC album. And I don't know about you, Todd, but this was a tough challenge because I
Oh,
love all of
definitely.
these albums. And, I remember when I did my ranking, that was really difficult too, because there really is no such thing as a bad XTC album.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then choosing a song from each one, that was really, really difficult too. So yeah, so let's get into it and start off with we'll go through them chronologically as we always do with these shows. And we start off with White Music, the debut album. Wonderful album. Andy Partridge showing his rear end off there on the front cover. And what did you end up choosing as your favorite song off this one? Because there's a lot to choose from.
Well, my first choice, which I had to eliminate because it doesn't really count, my first choice was Science Friction, but it's
Mm,
not on the album. It's on the
no,
subsequent CDs. And
yeah,
so, which is funny, it's funny that I did that because not only my first exposure to that song was on the Compact XTC CD, the
mm,
compilation that came out in the late 80s. And I also had the 3D EP.
yeah,
So it didn't dawn on me to think, oh well, the songs on that EP are probably not on the actual album. So I changed my mind, and I was having trouble coming up with deciding between these two anyway. So I went with Statue of Liberty.
yep,
Um, just a great example of them very early having a great knack for pop sensibilities and writing songs like they've been doing it much longer than they had been. So
yeah,
so I
absolutely.
went
I
with
think
Statue of Liberty.
I think that song definitely points the way forward for them because I mean a lot of this album is kind of spiky and prickly and punky and whereas Statue of Liberty definitely more melodic, more like even though Andy's still singing in that very sort of exaggerated way on the song,
Yeah.
it's still very melodic song, Barry Andrews keyboards and stuff are more melodic and that sort of thing. They're not all over the shop like they are on a lot of these.
They're not super, stabby and what's the word I'm looking for? The
Like that sort of
rhythmically
hurdy-gurdy kind of
jagged.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I almost went with Statue of Liberty myself, but in the end, the song I picked was Radios in Motion, opening track.
Mhm.
So just a really great opening salvo, I think. Especially if you haven't heard the 3D EP and this is your introduction to XTC, early 1978. Radios in Motion, I think, just kind of hits you right between the eyes. Uh, it's
Yeah.
a great Andy song. It's propulsive. It's prickly and spiky, and um, yeah, it's just a great opening track. I think we'll find as we go through this process, I definitely have a bit of a predilection for opening tracks on XTC albums. So might see a
Yeah,
few
I
more of
totally get
those
that.
crop up as we go along. But yeah, that's my choice from White Music is Radios in Motion. So then we
Okay.
get to the second album, Go To, with that, you know, incredible cover, which is just full of text.
Yeah.
Hypnosis cover. And I don't know about you, Todd, but when I did the ranking, I actually ranked this one a little bit higher than the debut. I actually like this album a little bit better than the debut.
I
So,
have a confession to make. I
mm,
don't like this album.
oh,
And
fair enough.
I tried and tried and tried, and I've been through it like 4 or 5 times this past couple of weeks, and I really have trouble with it. The thing about it is that with this album, I feel like it's a lot, it's similar to a lot of albums that came out around that time. A lot of albums that I listened to, like on college, the songs that they'd play on college radio. I mean, it's got kind of a ska, some ska influence in places, and there are parts of it that sound kind of to me kind of like the Specials, and so while that's very timely and they were doing the right thing at the right time, it doesn't feel like the progression to the next thing like the one album that comes after it. But I still have hope. I still think that one of these days the light bulb is going to go off and I'm going to get really excited about this album. But so I had a little bit of trouble. Again, can't pick Are You Receiving Me because technically it doesn't count. It's on the CD, but not on the album. So I went with Red.
Yeah.
I like the way Red chugs along, and even though the guitar parts are a little noisier and more chaotic than I like, I think that they really came up with something cool for that song,
Mm.
and melodically it hangs together really well. So I went with Red.
And of course, you've got Barry Andrews honking away rather amateurishly on a saxophone
Yes.
during that song. So, which
As
I
a
think gives
as
it,
a not very good saxophone player myself, I am drawn to those kinds of things.
yeah, I think it gives the song some character.
Yeah.
I love it. Just fun fact, my Australian version of this actually does have "Are You
Oh,
Receiving
it
Me" on
does.
it.
Look at that. And in a weird
Yeah,
place too, because in
yeah,
the latest ones I think that came out from Ape put it last.
yes,
They just kind of tack it on the end.
yeah, very much as a bonus track. But yeah, the original Australian pressing actually had "Are You Receiving Me" on it. So there you go.
And
But I
releases
didn't
of
pick.
this have always been scarce in the States.
Mm,
The,
I
the original vinyl was scarce. The CDs subsequently were scarce.
yeah. I didn't pick "Are You Receiving Me" because I felt just because it's on the Australian version that was a little bit of a cheat. But I
Right.
do love that song. If it was on the regular album, I think I would definitely have gone with that because it's a
Yeah.
cracking single. I ended up going with a Collins song on this one, and the one I went with is "Crowded Room." You know, I would say, I don't know, maybe this is an entryway into this album for you, Todd. I think there is a quantum leap in Collins' songwriting between White Music and Go To.
That's fair. Yeah. As far as he's concerned. Yeah. Yeah.
I
I
think
think I agree with that. I
I think
considered that one. I almost picked it.
Yeah, I think I could have gone with pretty much any of his songs on this album because I think they're all really, really good. Whereas I think on White Music, I think Colin's songs are a little bit sort of like pale imitation of what Andy was doing at the time. I think very much he
Yeah.
finds his own voice on this album.
Yeah.
And it's got a great riff that da 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 da. I love that. And he's finding his own voice as a singer on this song. I love the lyric about just sort of, being in a packed music venue, listening to a band, getting into it. It's really good. It's got a little bit of like, a few of his songs have a little bit of that sort of very early Talking Heads feel to them.
Yeah.
And I love that about them. Um, Again, talking about opening tracks, though, I almost went with Mechanic Dancing because I absolutely think that's a great opening track, too. So, yeah.
Yep.
So then we get to Drums and Wires, and obviously the big change with this one is Barry Andrews, their keyboard player, is out. Dave Gregory, mainly a guitar player, although he'd play more and more keyboards as the years would go by, would be in for this album and pretty much for the rest of their albums until we get to the Apple Venus albums.
Yeah.
Um, this is obviously a breakthrough album for them. They have their first sort of hit single off this. And, a lot of people rate this as the best XTC album. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I think it's an
I don't
absolutely
either.
wonderful album.
Yeah.
Um, so what'd you end up picking on this album? Because again, lot to choose from here, I think.
Okay, well, with this one, this was hard. I went through three or four. Um,
Mm.
but I went with a Collins song for this one. I went with 10 Feet Tall,
Yeah.
mostly because I adore the guitar solo. I
Mm.
think it's absolutely sublime. And this album, this was the first one that I heard, and it was really the first one in the States that got any attention at all. And I remember there was a video, and I don't even know where we saw it, but we saw it on TV somewhere. It might have been there was an American show called Night Flight. They would sometimes show uh, new wave videos, and I think that might have been what I saw it on. But the video for Life Begins at the Top, even
Yeah.
and again. I'm looking at the original UK release and it's not on there. So
No.
so I couldn't pick that one. But I just remember that video making such an impression, the visuals making such an impression, and me and my friends just looking at each other going, I've never seen a band like this before. There was and so when this album came out, we were absolutely blown away by it. And I almost picked That Is the Way. I almost picked Scissor Man. I almost picked Complicated Game because all of those I absolutely adore. But I went with 10 Feet Tall because I think that it's really elegant and sophisticated for a
Mm,
band like this that makes this kind of music. I think it's really a step in the direction of where they were going. So I would
yeah.
10 Feet Tall.
Fair enough. I actually probably the first version I heard of 10 Feet Tall wasn't this one. It was the one that was released, I think, as a single in Canada or
Okay.
somewhere like that, and it's on the Fossil Fuels
Oh
um,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
compilation album, and it's a bit more electric than the one
Hmm.
on this one, where this one's
I
got a lot of
forgot all about
acoustic
that.
guitar on that, and yeah, so yeah, great song. I went with Outside World because I just, again, what a great riff at the beginning of that song. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got such great energy to it. Um, Andy just delivers it so well, and I love the lyric too. Um, you know, sort of this, idea of being separated from the outside world and all that sort of thing. I
Uh-huh.
think, that kind of alienation and that sort of thing, I really, really get into. So, um, it was hard to go past Making Plans for Nigel, though. That song is so good.
Yeah.
And it was a
One of my
you know,
cat's names is Nigel because of that.
yeah. And, it was the first single of theirs that really got, some chart action and, sort of attention on radio and TV and all that sort of thing. I love the clip for that one, actually, because I think,
Hmm.
you've got the sort of the Nigel character in the chair, kind of catatonic,
Yeah.
um, and Andy climbing into that little box and not being able to get out of it again, and um, yeah, it's a great song. But yeah, Outside World is my pick for Drums and Wires because, again, just absolutely love the boundless energy on it. But yeah, I mean, I could have gone with Scissor Man. I could have gone with Reel by Reel, which is a great song
Hmm.
too. Complicated Game is sort of like the first of his big sort of epic ending
Yeah.
tracks, which would become a bit of a feature of a few of the albums as we go along. But
Yeah.
yeah, a lot to choose from. But then we get to an album I think is even better than Drums and Wires, and
I
that's
agree.
Black Sea. One of my very favorites. This is like, depending on what day you ask me, this is a top three XTC album for me. Love it to bits. Love that album cover too, with them in the
Yeah.
old fashioned diving suits.
And I like it like that better because in the States, in Australia, did it come with the green bag on the outside?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
you could get it like that, but I don't have that outer. I've just got that. So
In the States, it didn't, once you took it out of the green bag, it didn't say XTC Black Sea on it. It was just the
mm,
the photo. And then
yeah,
the
well,
CD later on adds it.
that's
Oh, was
actually
that
a
a sticker?
sticker.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
on the cover. So this was a tough one for me. I don't know about you, but this was a really tough
Very,
one for me.
very. Well, one of the things that made an impression on me when I heard this album is I think I am let me look at the date real quick. I am at this point, oh, okay, going into the 11th grade, I think, when this comes out. And I'm listening to Yes and Pink Floyd and
Mm,
Rush. And one of the things that really made an impression on me with this album is how well they played.
Mm,
You know, how good the drummer was and how well the band played and how tight they were. And I mean, I sort of got a sense with the album before with Complicated Game that they were capable of making like prog rock, like something with real drama. And then when this album came out, I was like, whoa. And so my early favorite was Paper and Iron Notes and Coins because
mm,
I just love that rhythmic, dun, 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 you know, that riff is just on fire and they play, it's almost heavy, that song.
mm.
And and so I almost went with that. I have always liked Love at First Sight, but I went with Generals and Majors. And
Yep.
and I another Collins song, but I went with it and almost kind of reluctantly because it seems like the obvious choice, but melodically that song is so good. That riff is so creative and it's sophisticated in the way that the chord changes are. And talk about something that really points the way to them becoming more becoming just exceptional songwriters. I just think it's fantastic. So, and I like the
Yeah.
lyrical content. So I went with
Yeah.
Generals and Majors.
It's a funny thing. I read a story that with that song that Colin almost got rid of that song, almost binned it because he didn't think it was quite working until Andy came up with that riff that dee 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 dee. That
Just
was
the way
what
that
he.
that is the same and the chords change around it.
Yeah,
That's really good stuff.
but
I
yeah,
like that.
Colin felt that riff saved the song. So
Hmm.
yeah, I mean it's a brilliant song. It's undeniable. I am going to, however, go with another opening track, and that is Respectable Street.
Yeah,
What a great opener. It starts off with that really, scratchy, um, you know, old
the
record sound,
recording. Yeah.
which apparently they got that sound by Steve Lillywhite, had just gotten a test pressing of Peter Gabriel 3.
Oh, okay.
And apparently they scratched that all up to get that scratchy sound for the record
That would be a
for
good
Respectable
collector's
Street.
item.
Yeah. But and then and then it just kicks in with that riff that just like absolutely bangs the door down.
Yeah.
That boom down, down. Talk about XTC getting heavy. That's a
And that drum
really heavy
sound.
riff. Yeah,
I mean, so aggressive.
yeah,
Just
absolutely. And then the
fantastic.
lyric is just so witty, about
Hmm.
these, neighbors next door who are just like a nightmare to live next to. And
Right.
um, yeah, it's just terrific song. I've always loved Respectable Street. I could have gone with the closing track too, Travel to Nihilon. I think just as epic and maybe even for me a slightly better song than Complicated Game. I love Travel to Nihilon because it's just so, it's echoey and dark and menacing.
Yeah.
Just a
I
great
can
way to end the album.
I considered No Language in Our Lungs too.
Yeah, absolutely. What a
And you
great
know
song
that
that
one
is.
and Travels in the Healing the both of them are they're definitely gotta be in the mood tracks.
Mm,
You know, which I sort of like that you know each side start, you know, ends with one of those. But yeah,
yeah,
just such a strong album.
yeah. Then we get English Settlement, the first of a few double albums that they would do in their career. I mean, this came out as a double and as a single. Like the double album has 15 songs, the single has 11, I think.
Hmm.
So I
In the
love.
US, we didn't get the double. We only got the single.
Oh, that's a shame. And
And they flip. I don't know if it's the same worldwide, but they flip Snowman and all of a sudden it's too late.
yes,
Like the album closer is all of a sudden it's too late. So
yeah,
I actually still think of it that way.
yeah. Here in Australia, we got both. So like this
Okay.
one's the double, and it's like a limited edition. It's like
Oh,
only
nice.
5,000 were released.
Uh-huh.
So numbered limited edition. And
Wow, was that hard to find?
yeah, it can be hard to find. Yeah, I mean, I've had this one for a while, so but a lot to choose from on this album. There's
Yeah.
15 songs on it, so and what'd you end up going for?
Well, I ended up I really wanted to pick Senses Working Overtime because I think it's one of the greatest drum performances of that era. I just think that it's just fantastic. But I went with Ball and Chain because I think it's a better song.
Hmm.
Um, on, the keyboard melody in there is just it's so beautiful and kind of understated and it's it's kind of a raucous song. It kind of churns along and then it just sort of kicks back into that melody and it's sort of like it eases it gets kind of a little lighter and a little easier and then it jumps back in when you start singing the chorus. So yeah, I just a very unique arrangement
Yeah. Yeah,
for
no, it's a great song. This is an interesting album because I think this is pretty much the only XTC album in the entire catalog that starts with two Collins songs.
yeah,
Because it
yeah, I think
starts
it
with
is.
Runaway and then you get Ball and Chain after it. So, and then you won't get another Collins song until side D.
Right.
So, um, yeah. Look, I almost went with No Thugs in Our House because I love that song. Again, it's that, sort of almost sort of Ray Davies sort of storytelling kind of song, which I love it when Andy does that. But in
Yeah.
the end, I did go with Senses Working Overtime. And it's very much a sentimental reason for me because it was the first XTC song I ever heard.
Okay.
1982, that came out as a single. I would have been 11 years old. And I saw the clip for it on one of the Saturday morning clip shows that we used to have here in Australia, and fell instantly in love with it. I think I was just captivated by that, almost sort of medieval sound in the verses,
Yeah.
and then it kicks into, that wonderful electric 12-string guitar in the bridge, the sort of pre-chorus and the chorus, and you get that one of the great choruses of all time. I think that one,
Yeah.
2, 3, 4, 5
Yeah.
senses working. It's just a great chorus.
And it
It's
was
a
a great video too. Pretty much a straight performance video and it with some budget. Like you can
mm,
see like the image from the front cover, in the background and it kind of cameras moving and it's just like somebody spent some money on this.
yeah, and a lot of it, I think, quite a bit of it, they recorded it at double speed and then played it back half speed so that you get that sort of
Oh, okay, yeah.
kind of feel to it. So yeah, but it's just a wonderful song that doesn't sound like it should work as a hit single because, you know, how many sort of medieval sounding, bardcore wasn't a thing yet.
Right.
Um, you know, um, how many medieval kind of songs were there in 1982? I think there was this and that
Hmm.
was about it. But this ended up being in the UK, astonishingly, their only top 10 single.
Hmm.
Just astounding that they only had one top 10 single in the UK. I
Yeah.
can't believe that.
Yeah.
And it was
One
definitely
song
the
that Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. One song that I really like that I almost picked that nobody ever talks about is English Roundabout.
oh, I
And I'll tell
love
you
that
why.
song.
Because it's the guitar work in that almost it's almost like math rock. It's almost like
Mm,
King Crimson. And, I think that that's really cool.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm a sucker for a song in odd time signatures,
Yeah.
and it's in 5/4. So, and like
Uh-huh.
Terry's playing this very sort of ska beat, but in 5/4. He's doing these all these rim shots, and yeah, it's a
Yeah.
wonderful song that doesn't get talked about enough. I agree. Then, of course, there'd be another big change for the band because they would stop touring. Andy would, be coming off his Valium and he would be having these massive panic attacks and he couldn't go on stage anymore. And they stopped touring and they never toured again. And they started making these albums that were very much designed not to be played on stage.
Right.
And they start off with this, which this is actually my son's favorite XTC album, Mama.
Okay.
So which I think is an interesting and very contrarian choice. I
Yeah.
love this album too, but I wouldn't think of, you know, picking it as my absolute favorite. But it's definitely a different sort of sound for the band, this album. So, what did you end up going for on this one?
Well, one of the things that astonishes me when I look at the release dates of these albums is that this was the following year after
Mm,
English Settlement, and it seemed like an eternity. I mean, everything seems longer when you're young, but time-wise, but it
mm,
just seemed like it took forever. Like we waited forever for this album. We really did wait that long. But one thing that I want to say about it before I reveal my favorite song is that I think that the drummer for most of the tracks, Terry plays on three, but the drummer for most of the tracks, Pete Phipps, is way underrated, and nobody ever talks about him as much as they
mm.
should. I think the drum tracks on this album and the one after it are just fantastic. But I went with Great Fire, and
Yep.
I I really wanted to pick Love on a Farm Boy's Wages because I love it so much. But but I just think Great Fire is just fantastic. I like a good gimmick when it works, and the fire engine bells just works for me. I just think that
Mm,
it and the pace that it goes at is I think is just perfect for the content of the song, and I just like the I like how it changes from one thing to another.
mm.
I just think it's fantastic. I considered Funk Pop a Roll, and one of the things I love about that song is that it's such a weird way to end this album
Yeah.
that has things on it that are almost pastoral, and
Yes.
then it ends with that big noisy thing,
Yeah. I
which
mean,
I think is brilliant.
Yeah, Funk Papa Roll sounds like it should be on the next album.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, Great Fire, wonderful song. I love with Great Fire too how it ends just by sort of, going into the abyss of echo. They just add
yeah,
more and more and more echo until it just becomes noise.
yeah.
So,
It's a really creative way to do a fade out.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Opening tracks, man, opening tracks. I went with Beating of Heart. And
Yeah, that song's way underrated.
yeah, just a wonderful way to open the album. Terry does play on that one, and he comes up with this wonderful sort of drum beat for it. Um, I think this sort of prefigures Dukes of Stratosphere a little bit,
Hmm.
getting that kind of psychedelic 60s sort of sound. Um, just a terrific way to open the album. I almost went with a Collins song on this one, talking about songs that have a bit of a psychedelic feel to them. I almost went with Deliver Us from the Elements
Yeah.
because
When this album came out, that was my favorite.
I think that's a well underrated song
Yeah.
on this album too. But these next sort of this one and the next one, I think Colin gets a little overshadowed.
Yeah.
Um, everybody talks
His
about the
stuff is
Andy songs.
good, but
Yeah,
yeah.
but everybody talks about the Andy songs on Mama and on The Big Express, which I've got the like a
Ah, yours
round,
is round.
yeah, die cut
We didn't get
sleeve.
that here.
Yeah. So I think we got both. Again, I think like the initial pressing was the die cut sleeve, and then they only did like a limited amount of those. And then after
Okay.
that, they went to a regular sleeve, which is funny that they did that at all here in Australia because Australian pressings, especially in sort of like 60s and 70s, maybe not so much in the 80s, Australian pressings were absolutely notorious for cutting costs on the covers.
Okay.
Like they would often cut gatefold sleeves down into regular sleeves and things like that. It was quite annoying when you look at Australian pressings and
Yeah, to a
we
lesser extent, Canadian releases were like that. US
yeah,
releases tended to feel like they had a bigger budget. But yeah.
yeah. So, this is an overlooked album, I think, in the XTC catalog. It's not one of my favorites, I will admit that.
Yeah, same
Um,
here.
I'm not a huge fan of the production on this album. I think there's some wonderful songs on it though. So what'd you end up going for with this one?
With this one, I went with This World Over,
Yeah.
and I really I wanted to pick Seagull Screaming, Kiss Her because I think it's so cool. And All You Pretty Girls, when I heard that, I remember it's funny because even though I think Deliver Us from the Elements has this too. When I heard All You Pretty Girls, I was like, is that a Mellotron? Because at this time,
Mm,
nobody was using that. That was a tired old dusty instrument that only dinosaurs played.
yeah.
And, and so when XTC used it, I was like, XTC's using a Mellotron? Because I wondered when Black Sea came out, if XTC was going to evolve into like a prog band because it almost sounded like they were going in that direction. And then I heard All You Pretty Girls and I was like, oh, wow. But I went with This World Over, partly because I really like the lyrical content. I think that I like that it's so creative about, well, the people will remember the leader with the famous face and all that kind of stuff instead of naming anyone. And
Mm,
musically, I just think it's beautiful. It's simple and elegant, and I absolutely love it. But I think I like this album more than most people.
yeah.
I
I
really like every single song on it. And wow, I mean, I love I Remember the Sun, and I love
mm,
uh 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 You're the Wish You Are I Had. I think this is a really good album.
yeah, absolutely. Look, it's not one of my absolute favorite XTC albums, but that's because of the production. I think the songs on here are absolutely great. You know, I bought myself a Lyrebird, you know, one of those great songs that bands would do, sort of savaging their ex-manager. You know, I'm
Uh-huh.
thinking of Death on Two Legs by Queen was another one of those.
Yeah.
Um, so and have you ever there was a book, I think it was written by uh somebody Farmer, Nigel Farmer or somebody like that, where they interviewed the band and like talked about every song.
Yeah, yeah, I've read that book,
Yeah,
and I don't have it anymore. But
yeah, I've still got it somewhere. But when they got to I Bought Myself a Lyrebird, the only thing it said was that XTC were legally obligated to not talk about that
did
song.
not talk about it.
So that's all you got about that song. Um, I look, my favorite song on this album is This World Over too. I absolutely adore it. I love the atmosphere. I think it's one of the songs where the production really works.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's just a wonderful lyric about sort of, post-apocalyptic England and all that sort of thing. But the other song, you did mention it briefly, that I wanted to sort of put a spotlight on, is I Remember the Sun, because it's a great Colin song that doesn't get talked about.
Yeah.
Um, it's got this wonderful sort of almost, it almost sounds like a bird or an animal or something, that guitar, that um, and it's got beautiful piano from Dave Gregory on it. It's a great vocal from Colin. Um, it's just a wonderful, wonderful song. And like Colin only gets two songs on this album, which is,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would have loved to have him to have had another song or two on this album. But
But his other song, Wake Up, that
mm,
is one of my favorite XTC opening tracks.
yeah,
I love the rhythmic aspect of it and how it's again almost like a almost proggy in its complexity. But I really love the way the drums are the playing by Peter Phipps, but also the way that they're engineered. And
yeah,
it does give you the impression of because I think David Lord, he's produced Peter Gabriel, hasn't he?
yes, he has.
And you sort of get that feel with Wake Up, and so I like Wake
Mm.
Up too. I almost picked that.
Here's a fun fact about that song. I actually used the opening of that song as an alarm on my phone.
Oh.
That's what I literally woke up to this morning. I set an alarm so that I'd be ready for the
That's a
day.
that's a great idea.
And yeah, that was what I woke up to. So then we get, I mean, elephant in the room here. We're both wearing Todd Rundgren t-shirts for this show.
Yeah, just a coincidence.
And he produced this album right here, Skylarking, which, you know, definitely a breakthrough album for them in the States. Maybe so not so much in terms of sales, but definitely in terms of sort of radio airplay and that sort of thing. Um, this is such a good album. Uh, you know, even though there was so much butting of heads in the making of it, I think Andy once described the butting of heads between him and Todd during the making of this album as being one bunker, two Hitlers.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, again, 15 songs to choose from, or 14. There was a 15th that was added later on.
Mhm.
But what did you end up going for with
Okay, well,
Skylarking?
I feel like to be fair, there were two songs battling it out with each other. And to be fair, I want to first mention the one that lost because it's one of my favorite songs of all time. I didn't pick Sacrificial Bonfire, but I
Mm,
love it so much.
it's such a good song. What a
I
great
think it's one
closing
of the
track.
most, I think it's one of the most beautiful songs that I've ever heard. And I think that it's one of the best album closers
Mm,
I've ever. But what I went with, and it's amazing that I didn't pick Dear God as good as it is, but that's how great this album is. I went with The Man Who Sailed Around His Soul.
oh,
And the reason why I picked it is because well, lots of reasons, but one of the biggest reasons is I think that it's one of the best, and this is saying a lot, and people will probably make fun of me for saying this. I think it's one of the best drum recordings and performances
mm,
possibly by anyone ever. I think that apparently when they came to California to record the drums, Andy was very, very impressed with Prairie Prince because of how he played this song and what how he transformed it. And so much so that as much as Andy used to like to talk about how bad of an experience this was, he kept inviting Prairie Prince back to play drum
mm,
tracks. So he must have at least thought that was worthwhile. The Man Who Sailed Around His Soul is just an absolutely stunning piece of music from
yeah,
start to finish. And the way it swings, it's just got so much style and so much character. I can't say enough good things about it.
yeah,
And that's,
absolutely.
so many other songs are so great.
Mm.
But
Well,
I
that's
had
the
to pick
thing.
that one.
I mean, The Man Who Sailed Around His Soul, I mean, again, odd time signatures. It starts off in 7/8, which,
Hmm.
I love that. But I think that song, it's not my pick, but I think that song is probably the perfect example of the collaboration between Andy and Todd.
Yeah,
Andy wrote an incredible song, and then Todd did this just brilliant arrangement on it.
yeah.
I think Andy called it COD spy music.
Yeah.
It sounds like it could be from a 60s James Bond film.
Hmm.
It's just so good. But the song I went with, and again, it was a toss up for me. So I'll do what you did, and I'll go with the one first that I almost went with but didn't quite, and that is Another Satellite.
Yeah,
Um,
I love
it's
that.
such a good song. It's this really somber musically. It's very somber sounding. It's quite stripped back. Um, there's not a lot of instrumentation on it. The guitar that you're hearing is not actually a guitar. It's a sample played on a
Yeah.
keyboard. Um, and the lyric is, basically, it was a song to Erica at the time, Erica Wexler, who's now his partner, but at the time he was married to his wife Marianne, and Erica was sort of the other satellite, as it were, and he was
Uh-huh.
basically trying to tell her to buzz off.
Yeah, stop
Um,
hovering. Yeah.
mm, so yeah, but the song I ended up going with is musically probably couldn't be more different. It's bright, it's sunshiny, and that's really super super girl.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, what a great, it's bouncy, it's bright, I love everything about it. It's such a good vocal from Andy. Great little guitar solo in the middle of it from Dave too.
Hmm.
Um, really, really good. But yeah, so I ended up going with That's Really Super Supergirl. I've got to say, I personally, I mean, and I can't argue with anybody who wouldn't do this. I personally disqualified Dear God because it wasn't on the original version of the
Yeah,
album. It
I
was a
agree.
replacement track. So
That's mainly why I didn't pick it.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it's a great song, even though Andy felt that lyrically the song didn't quite do what he wanted it to do. But I still love it a lot. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Amazing too that they would put so much work into something that they ultimately decided to cut.
yeah. Well,
It's
apparently
obviously,
Todd was very against them cutting Dear God.
yeah.
So um, yeah. So then we get another double album, Oranges and Lemons. And it's got that very, this one of those album covers that absolutely suits the music, I think.
Yeah.
You know, it really does have that sort of bright, sunshiny 60s kind of sound to it. And I'll definitely have a little tale to tell about one of the songs on this. But what'd you end up going for on Oranges and Lemons?
Okay, I went with King for a Day.
Mm-hmm.
Again, a Collins song. One of my favorite XTC songs, probably top five or six, maybe. Um, it's funny thing about this album is as enthusiastic as I was when it came out, it hasn't stuck with me as much as I thought that it would.
Mm.
I don't know whether it's too long. I mean, it's only 60 minutes long, so it really isn't that long when you consider the CD era, which we were just, in the beginning of, made for a lot of albums that are a lot longer than that. Um, I'm not really sure why. It kind of has the album kind of has a kind of a noisy feel to me, that it's almost a little bit not abrasive in content kind of a way, but it just feels like there's so much happening. It's funny because Paul Fox is one of my favorite producers. He produced my favorite They Might Be Giants album, which is John Henry. And so
Mm.
I'm not going to say I don't like the production, but one of the let's see what else would I Chalk Hills and Children was something I considered. Miniature Sun I considered. I like Mayor of Simpleton. I like Scarecrow People a lot. But yeah, I went with King for a Day. I think it's one of Colin's
Yeah.
best songs.
Absolutely. You know what? I think with this album, again, I'm not a big fan of the production on it. I think the word that I think of when I think of the production on this album is brash.
Yeah,
It's very brash. Whereas, Skylarking was a little bit more subdued and subtle. This was very brash and in your face. And and I don't think the songs on this album are quite as good as the ones on Skylarking, but I mean
I
that's a
agree.
massively high bar to clear.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
but the song before I get to which is my favorite song, the song on this that always sticks with me is Mayor of Simpleton because here in Australia, even though it wasn't a chart hit, it got a lot of radio airplay. And
Okay.
1989 was my first year at university, and
Okay.
we used to there was like this sort of rec room at the university where we would hang out and play pool and play pinball machines and stuff and between classes or sometimes instead of classes. And yeah, the radio would be on all the time. And there were two songs that I just remember hearing over and over again and falling in love with. One was Mayor of Simpleton, the other was Sowing the Seeds of Love by Tears for Fears.
Okay.
But those, to me, I can't sort of extract those songs from 1989 and my first year at university.
Well, that track was pretty it was pretty popular in the States. This album in the US got to number 44, which I think is
Mm,
pretty good for them.
yes,
To number
absolutely.
28 in the UK Australian chart was at number 91.
Mm,
So I think it was a little bit more popular here. But
yeah,
yeah, that song got a lot of airplay in
yeah.
the US.
But I'm going to be in agreement with you for this album. My favorite song is also King for a Day. Um, just a great song. I love if you anybody who's watching, if you haven't seen it, you want to see the band play this song live. They actually did it on, I think it was Letterman, or yeah,
Oh yeah, yeah, I forgot about that.
and yeah. So that's well worth seeking out on YouTube if you haven't
Mhm.
before. The other song that I will point out for just a little bit of talking about, who's my sort of second favorite on this album, is Poor Skeleton Steps Out,
Mhm.
which I think is a wonderful song. It's got these, sort of xylophones or marimba or whatever it is in the background, and you know, I think the lyric is playful. I like the music to it. I think I like Pat Mastelotto's drums on this. Yeah,
Yeah,
Pat Mastelotto, who was from Mr. and would later be
right.
in King Crimson, plays the drums on this album. So, and they had a great time working with Pat too. So, but yeah. So, Poor Skeleton Steps Out is the other song that I would sort of talk about on this album.
Yeah, I like that one a lot too.
Yeah. Then we get to my personal contrarian choice for favorite XTC album, which is Nonsuch.
Oh, okay. You know, in a minute I'll tell you my saga with Nonsuch too,
Yeah,
because I'm kind
but
of in this.
I love this album to death. This was a really hard album for me to choose a song for because A, I think the songs are all really, really good on this album, but B, more so than any other XTC album, I hear this album as almost like one piece of music.
Yeah,
So choosing a sort of, an episode or a selection from this album, that made it that much more difficult for me just because I hear this album as an album so much. So yeah, you had some thoughts on this album?
yeah. Well, I don't know whether you did that. I think you may have done this show on the Contrarians where we did this as a
Yeah.
dark horse, and that was I really wanted to do this album justice, and I thought that I was going to be like, oh, well, it's probably my fourth or fifth favorite album. I'll probably give it an 8 or 8.5 or something like that. And I spent a solid week with the headphones on, really studying it. And I think I gave it a 9.5 out of 10 rating on that
Mm,
show. And it jumped way up. I don't like it better than Skylarking, but it's close. I think that this is just an absolutely brilliant album. And I picked Wrapped in Gray
mm,
because I think it's really beautiful. I think it's tragic that that was supposed to be a single and the label canceled it, making Andy angry and setting into motion what happens to the band for the next 5 or 6 years.
mm,
But I think Wrapped in Gray is absolutely beautiful. But the song that really has gone way up in stature for me is Rook. I think
mm,
Rook is just absolutely brilliant. And the arrangement, the way it's kind of like a round, it's so creative. And it must have been, when I hear that, I think, God, it must have been really hard to to record that and have it
mm,
come out as good as it did. It's just really beautiful. I don't
yeah.
like it as much musically as Wrapped in Gray, but I think Rook is just absolutely stunning. I like Books Are Burning. I love that in my head, I don't know if this is actually what's happening, but I can imagine that it is because this is what it sounds like. It sounds like a lead guitar trade-off between Dave and Andy
Yeah,
is my
that's what
guess.
it is. Yeah.
And it I've never really seen anything that has actually said, that's what's happening, but that's what
Mm,
my ears hear. And so I'm glad to
yeah.
find out that that is actually what it is. And that's one of my favorite things about that song. But so many great songs on this album. And the ones that if you spend some time away from this album, and you think, oh, you look at the song titles and then when you listen to the album, you think, oh, I like that more than I thought I
Mm,
did. Dear Madam Barnum, Humble Daisy, The Smartest Monkeys, all of those songs.
yeah.
Crocodile, Then She Appeared. They're all like when you hear them again, you're just like, oh yeah, I really actually do like that song.
Yeah.
Super
Well,
strong album.
yeah.
Interesting, really interesting stories about how it was recorded with Gus Judgeon. Had this way that he liked to record the piano where he raised the piano up over their heads and mic'd it from below and all kinds of really cool things that he did. He was a
Mm,
pretty eccentric, creative producer. And
Yeah.
I think it's a great match for them. Not
Yeah.
everybody thinks that, but
No, I think I love the production on this album, and it was mixed by Nick Davis,
hmm
who obviously well known for working with Genesis and that
hmm
sort of thing. But yeah, another recommendation for your YouTube watching, if you can find it on YouTube, there is the band play Books Are Burning live. I think it was on some BBC show,
I don't think I've ever seen that.
and it's
I
absolutely
have to look for
wonderful.
that.
And Andy plays all of the lead on that one
Uh,
because
oh, really?
Dave's playing
Dave's playing
Hammond
keyboards?
organ. Yeah,
Okay.
well he's playing organ, I think.
Okay.
Dave is, and I think it's just the four of them. I think it's Andy, Colin, Dave, and Dave Maddox on drums. So because he plays the drums on this whole album, but this album was very important for me too because I loved XTC from sort of uh, Senses Working Overtime onwards, but I wasn't fully following them. I wasn't buying all the albums. I would hear the odd song here and there and always think, oh
Yeah.
yeah, I really like that. I bought the single of The Disappointed, and that's what got me fully back into XTC um, in 1992. Because that the B side of that was Smartest Monkeys, and then the CD single also had, I think it had Making Plans for Nigel and Generals and Majors and a couple of
Okay.
other of their big hit singles as like bonus tracks on the CD
Yeah.
single. So yeah, what a wonderful album. I ended up going with Rook because it definitely points the way to where they were going with Apple Venus.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, just wonderful, as you say. It's got that kind of round feeling to it. I love Andy's vocal on it. I think it's one of his best ever vocals. Yeah, it's just, and the orchestration is wonderful. But I almost went with That Wave because, again, couldn't be
I
a
like that
polar
too.
opposite from Rook. But
Yeah.
it's got, again, it's kind of ominous sounding. It's rumbling like waves are. The lyric is great, and Dave Gregory plays one of his best guitar solos on That Wave. He just really tumbling, diddly diddly diddly, it's just
Yeah.
really really good guitar solo. So yeah, as you were sort of alluding to, after Wrapped in Grey was pulled as a single by Virgin, the band would go on strike for about 5 or 6 years until Virgin released them from their contract. In fact, what Andy did was he offered them an album kind of in the spirit of Dukes of Stratosphere, where they were going to do an album where it was going to be a pretend sort of compilation album of bubblegum songs from the
Yeah, like
60s.
bubblegum pop. Yep.
And each song was going to be by a different pretend band. Uh, I would have loved to have heard that album. I think it
Yeah,
would
me
have been
too.
absolutely stunning. But the record company just kind of looked at him and said, "What the fuck, Andy? What are you
They were like,
doing?"
no. Yeah.
No. So they ended up going on strike until Virgin finally released them from their record contract, and then they brought out this, which is one of my favorite XTC
Yeah.
albums, Apple Venus Volume One. Beautiful album cover too. I love that peacock feather. This was a tough one. This was a really tough one
Yeah.
for me. Um, yeah, what did you end up going for on this one?
I went with Easter Theater.
Mm,
I think it was always going to be that. Uh, just the best, one of the best arrangements that they've ever done. I think that this whole album actually is Andy's best vocal performance.
yes.
And there are a couple of songs where he really shines. I Can't Own Her and The Last Balloon and Harvest Festival, but I think the very best one is Easter Theater. But I mean, Nights and Shining Karma is so good. I
Mm,
I kind of have the feeling that Colin's contributions to this album and the next album were not at the usual level that they usually are. But I like Frivolous Tonight a lot. I think Green Man is spectacular. So it
Mm,
was a high bar. It was hard to pick, the best one out of all those, but
yeah.
I picked Easter Theater. The thing about this album and the next album is I can go back to this one now and say that I really love it from start to finish, and it's very strong and it's one of my favorite ones. But at the time, this album and the next album felt slightly underwhelming and maybe just a little bit disappointing, only because it had been so long. And these kinds of songs that are on this volume one are the kind of XTC songs that I love the most. But having it miss the other side of the band,
Mm,
having it missing the noisier part of the band, really, I really kind of felt kind of let down by that. And it
yeah.
took years for it to rise back up to the level where it's at right now.
Yeah,
It's
no,
probably
fair
my
enough.
third favorite album, but
Yeah, it's right up there for me too.
and they argued about that. Dave did not want to do the double album. He wanted to combine it into one,
Mm,
and he said I think his quote was, "This is not the album we need to be making right now after being gone for 6 years."
yeah. And he ended
And
up leaving the band as a result of
he's
it, which
not.
is
He wasn't wrong. I mean,
yeah.
maybe from a creative standpoint, but from a commercial standpoint, he also got really upset that he wouldn't sign. He didn't want to sign the contract for the American distribution, which was a label called TBT.
Mm,
And because he talked to some of his friends, and his friends were like, "If you go on TBT, you're not going to get paid." And
mm,
I don't think it turned out very differently about than that. So unfortunately, Dave left, and I wish he hadn't left, but I think he was probably right about those two things.
yeah, I think so too. But
Yeah,
Andy's a stubborn old mule, and I think he'll be the first to admit that
yeah,
too.
yep.
Opening tracks, man, opening tracks. River
Oh,
of Orchids.
that is so good.
That is my favorite song on the album. Just I love the sort of circular composition of it. You've got these, horns and strings and what have you in the background playing these ostinatos just sort of over and over again. And
Yeah.
he builds this whole song over the top of it. Um, it's just, and Andy's doing the arrangements on this album. I think that's the other thing that Dave felt a little bit left out, that he wasn't doing
Hmm.
the sort of string and the horn arrangements and stuff because, Andy had like a keyboard that he could do these arrangements with by this stage.
Yeah.
So, um, but Andy's arrangements are so good,
Yeah.
on this album. And I
Well,
think River of Orchids is the prime example of how good
yeah.
his arrangements were.
Yeah. I think it's probably the best. I mean, if you had to pick the song that was the most impressive from this band, I think it would probably
Mm,
be that one. Uh,
yeah.
Apparently, he at one point, Andy asked Dave to write a string chart to one of the songs, and he said he wanted a 40 piece,
Mm,
and Dave turned in like a quartet, like a four piece, and it
mm,
and Andy rejected it. Another thing too was that Andy apparently was asking Dave to do keyboard things that Dave didn't feel like he was an accomplished enough keyboard to do. And
mm.
so many things caused friction between those two guys. And
Yeah.
I think it's really unfortunate, but
I want to put a shout out on this album. I think I agree with you for the most part about Colin's songs on these last two albums, but I want to put a shout out for Frivolous Tonight. I think
it is
a,
pretty
a
great.
it's a wonderful song. It's a triumph of writing a song about, just the humdrum things of life.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
He
musically,
was
it's
going for that
absolute.
and he really nailed it. Yeah.
Yeah. And like just the music on it, it's got Mellotron on it and, you know, um, and that sort of thing. But it's just a wonderful song. His vocal, I think, is absolutely charming. You know,
Hmm.
um, yeah, I think it's a triumph. I'm not so keen on Fruit Nut on this album, but I do love Frivolous Tonight. I think it's a great
Yeah,
song.
same here with those two.
So then we get the final XTC album, Wasp Star. Not one of my favorite XTC albums, unlike
Not
Apple
mine
Venus
either.
Volume 1. Um, so this was a bit of a tough one for me because well, I mean, there were probably still a few songs that were really competing for me, but there's a few songs on here that I'm just not a big fan of. In fact, there's one song on here that I might talk about. It's probably my least favorite XTC song. So, what
I
did you
wonder if
end
it's
up?
the same one.
Yeah, what did you end up picking?
Well, I ended up picking We're All Light.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think as XTC pop songs go, I think it's just a really I think it's a really great song. I think it really works. Uh, the album is a little noisy and a little abrasive at times, and We're All Light is just very melodic, very easy to like. There are a couple of songs on this album that I think are pretty great songs. I'll just mention two of them. I think Playground is pretty fantastic. The one good thing about this album, I think, is that it starts off well. I think it's
Mm,
got a good opening track, and the closing track, The Wheel and the Maypole, I think is really good. And that is a real slow burn. I mean, that's a
mm,
grower. I really wasn't sure about it when I first heard it, but as the years go by, I like it a lot. But I went with We're All Light. I feel like We're All Light is a really good example of something that if they had decided to only make one album, that if you'd have put that along with the songs from Apple Venus Volume 1, I think it would have given it the little pop
mm.
sensibility thing that album needs. But
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. I will say about the Wheel and the Maypole, I feel like that song is the perfect marriage of Apple Venus 1 and 2.
I do too.
Yeah, like you
And
get both flavors in that song, and I think it works brilliantly as a result.
it's a great way to end this album and to tie the two of them together. I just wish that some other things that were on this album didn't happen. But
Mm. Well, I'll tell you,
we'll talk
I'll
about that
tell
in a
you what,
minute.
and I'll see if this is the one you agree with. That my least favorite XTC song is Wounded Horse.
Oh, same here.
Yeah,
Same here.
I
I don't know
really don't.
why he decided to do. I mean, a a standard rock uh, uh, progression, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah,
it's
it's
just
just like a
just like
slow blues,
yeah,
and it's just not what I want to hear XTC doing.
yeah.
So
And it's followed by You and the Clouds Will Still Be Beautiful, which I think is fantastic.
yeah,
So it's like,
but
but it kind of the album gets bogged down by that. Well, I say your favorite because I don't want to mention
yeah.
it as one that I don't like.
Well, no, no, no. It's one you've already mentioned that you do like.
Okay, good.
Op Opening tracks, man. Opening
Okay.
tracks.
Yeah.
Playground. Love, love, love Playground. I just think, it starts off with that, again, great guitar riff, that and the drums are great in it. It's a
Hmm.
great vocal. I love the lyric about, sort of love in this day and age being like what we did back in the playground when we were 6 years old, sort of thing. I think
Yeah.
it's a great pop song. You know, um, I love Colin's backing vocals on this song.
Yeah.
It's nice to hear him sort of, one of the things that people can criticize the two Apple Venus albums for, I think, is that they don't sound like band albums. They sound like Andy songs and Colin songs, and
Yeah.
that each of them is not contributing very much to the other's songs.
That was one of Dave's complaints was that they didn't feel like a band, and I think I read Andy's quote on that. His answer to that was, "Well, it's not a band. This is a XCC is a brand for
Mm,
showcasing the songs of me and Colin."
yeah,
And so he
but
didn't think of it as that.
yeah, but hearing Colin doing these lovely little backing vocals on this song, love it.
Wheel in the Maypole too.
Yeah,
Colin
absolutely.
really makes that track.
But I do want to highlight one of Colin's tracks on this album too, and that is "Boarded Up." Um, I love it. It sounds like it should have been on the first Apple Venus album because it's very
Yeah.
acoustic. It's basically just acoustic guitar and like stomping on the ground for
Yeah.
percussion. Um, but I love the lyric about, small music venues closing up. That song would become very prescient during the pandemic,
Yeah.
because so many music venues ended up, going bust because of the pandemic and that sort of thing. But I think that's Colin's best song on the album. I really, really
I
like that
think In
song a
Another
lot.
Life is, but those two are really close.
Yeah, but
But
yeah,
I'm the Man Who Murdered Love is pretty fantastic. I
yeah,
love how he's like proud of it. It's like,
mm,
I did that, me.
yeah.
It's you're welcome. It's basically like saying.
So there you have it, everyone. Those are our favorite songs from each XTC album. Please do let us know in the comments what are your favorite songs from various XTC albums, because we'd love to hear in the comments, because everybody's going to have different choices and there's no wrong answers with this. I mean, we might even, I don't know, this might be a long shot, but on GoTo, we might even get someone who likes one of the Barry Andrews songs the best. Who knows?
Maybe I'll be one of those people who likes one of them
Yeah.
when I
But
finally get into it.
but yeah, there we have it. Todd, thank you so much for doing the show. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, you're quite welcome. I had a great time.
You'll definitely see Todd again on the channel very, very soon. We're planning a few things, so keep an eye out for that. Please do like, share, and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. If you're new to the channel, please go and have a look at some of my other videos. I have everything playlisted, so if you want to see some of my other favorite songs from each album show, Todd and I did one on the band Chicago. I've got a playlist for those. If you want to see some of my studio albums ranked shows, I have a playlist for those. And if you want to see my appearances on other people's channels, like the Contrarians, where Todd and I first met, I also have a playlist for those. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at bicyclelegs on Instagram, Twitter, and a bunch of other places. I also have a dedicated Bicyclelegs Facebook page. Links are all in the doobly-doo. Please do give those all a follow and join in the conversation. I'd really love to have you there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.